Elliot Harper lived in a world of silence, where the stars became his friends and the constellations were his only confidants. At 19 years old, he had never been kissed, never held a girl's hand, never felt the rush of love or the weight of heartbreak. In the small town of Holloway, the world moved slowly, and Elliot liked it that way most of the time. His days were spent in the mundane routine of school, work at his uncle's bookstore, and the occasional outing with the few friends he had. He wasn't antisocial, he just preferred the company of books, the smell of old paper, and the feeling of getting lost in another world. But his nights, that was when he truly came alive. Every evening, Elliot would grab his telescope and head to the hill just beyond his backyard. The hill overlooked a stretch of forest that seemed to go on forever, a dark sea of trees that held secrets he longed to uncover. He'd sit for hours, eyes glued to the sky, searching for something though he wasn't sure what. The stars held a mystery, a promise of something bigger, something more than his small, quiet life. It was on one such night, under the vast expanse of the cosmos, that Elliot's world would be forever altered. The sky was unusually clear that evening, the air crisp with the scent of pine from the nearby forest. Elliot's telescope was positioned toward the constellation Orion, his favorite. He admired its structure, the way the stars aligned perfectly, like a celestial hunter forever chasing a beast just beyond reach. As he adjusted the lens, a sudden streak of light shot across the sky. Elliot's heart skipped a beat. It wasn't just a meteor, it was brighter, more intense, and far closer than any he had ever seen. His pulse quickened as the light blazed through the atmosphere, descending rapidly toward the earth. Elliot stood, mesmerized, as the object disappeared beyond the horizon, crashing somewhere in the forest beyond the hill. For a moment, everything was still, the night quiet once more, as though nothing had happened. But Elliot knew better. Something was out there, something extraordinary. Grabbing his flashlight and jacket, he didn't hesitate. He ran down the hill, heart pounding, feet moving faster than they ever had before. The forest loomed ahead, dark and ominous, but Elliot felt an inexplicable pull guiding him forward. Whatever had fallen from the sky, it called to him. The trees closed in around him as he entered the forest, the night growing darker with each step. His flashlight cut through the blackness, casting long shadows that danced in the periphery of his vision. The silence was unnerving, the usual sounds of crickets and rustling leaves absent, as though the forest itself was holding its breath. Elliot pushed forward, his legs aching from the run, his lungs burning with the cold night air, and then he saw the glow. Ahead, beyond a cluster of trees, a soft, ethereal light pulsed, casting the forest floor in a strange, otherworldly hue. Elliot's breath caught in his throat as he stepped into the clearing. At the center was a crater, its edges smoldering, the grass around it singed and smoking. And there, in the middle of it all, was something he could hardly believe: a ship. Not a plane or a drone, but a sleek, metallic vessel unlike anything he had ever seen. It was shaped like a teardrop, its surface shimmering as though made of liquid light. Elliot approached cautiously, heart pounding in his ears. The ship hummed softly, its glow dimming as though it had expended its energy. As he got closer, a hatch on its side hissed open, steam escaping into the cool night air. Elliot froze. His flashlight beam wavered as he pointed it toward the open hatch. Something or someone was inside. And then she stepped out. The first thing Elliot noticed was her eyes' deep, violet orbs that shimmered in the darkness, as though they held entire galaxies within them. Her skin, pale and glowing faintly, was smooth and flawless, with a slight iridescence that caught the light in a way that made her appear ethereal. Long, silver hair cascaded down her back, moving like water with every step she took. She was tall, her figure impossibly perfect, dressed in a form-fitting suit that seemed to be made of the same material as her ship, shimmering, silver and alien in every way. And when she looked at him, Elliot felt as though he had been caught in a gravitational pull far stronger than any planet. For a long moment, they simply stared at each other, the silence between them heavy with unspoken tension. Elliot's heart raced, his mind struggling to comprehend what he was seeing. An actual alien was standing before him, and not just any alien. She was beautiful, more beautiful than any human girl he had ever seen, with a presence that was both intoxicating and terrifying. Finally she spoke, her voice soft and melodic, like a song carried on the wind.
"Who are you?" she asked, her eyes narrowing slightly as she studied him.
I'm Elliot," he stammered, unable to tear his gaze away from her. Who? What are you? She tilted her head, a small smile playing on her lips. I am Althea, and I believe you found me. The air between them seemed to thrum with an energy that Elliot had never felt before, an unspoken tension that crackled in the stillness of the night. He stared at her. Althea. The name seemed as mysterious as she was, almost too human, but everything about her was beyond his wildest imagination. His heart pounded, every breath he took feeling shallow, as though the very presence of this being, this woman, was somehow consuming the oxygen around him. She was too beautiful to be real, and possibly so. Her silver hair flowed like molten moonlight down her back, shimmering in waves, and her glowing violet eyes seemed to pierce through him, examining him in ways that went far deeper than his physical form. Elliot found his voice caught in his throat, his thoughts tangled in a web of disbelief and wonder. You, he began, but words seemed to fail him. How could he even begin to ask the thousands of questions swirling in his mind? Who was she? Where did she come from? Was this real? Althea took a slow step toward him, her movements graceful, as though the earth itself bent to her will. The soft light from her ship bathed her in a pale glow, making her appear almost ghostly, but her gaze was warm, curious and calculating all at once. She seemed to notice his apprehension, the nervous tremble in his hands, and her lips curled into a faint smile. It wasn't a smile of reassurance, but something else, something more primal, almost predatory. Are you afraid? Elliot, her voice was like velvet, soft and rich, wrapping around him like a warm night breeze. There was something hypnotic about it, something that made his heart skip a beat, though he couldn't decide whether it was out of fear or attraction. I don't know, he admitted, feeling like a deer caught in headlights. Everything about her disarmed him, from her voice to the way her eyes lingered on him, just a moment too long. He could barely think, let alone understand what was happening. You're not from here. Althea's smile deepened, and she moved closer, closing the distance between them until she was only a few feet away. Her proximity sent a wave of heat through him, a sensation that made his skin prickle. He could smell something faintly sweet in the air around her, a fragrance that was both unfamiliar and intoxicating. No, I am not from here, she said softly, as though speaking to a child. She raised a hand, long fingers with nails that shimmered like pearls reaching out to gently touch his arm. Elliot flinched slightly, but he didn't pull away. Her touch was cool, almost electric, and it sent a jolt of something excitement, fear, or maybe something in between through his entire body. For a long moment, they stood like that, frozen in time, her eyes never left his, and in the silence, Elliot felt something stirring within him, something he couldn't quite name. He'd never been this close to a girl before, let alone someone or something so impossibly beautiful. There was a strange allure about her, a magnetic pull that both scared and fascinated him in equal measure. I saw your ship, he finally managed, his voice shaky. It crashed. Here he gestured weakly to the smoldering crater behind her, trying to cling to some sense of reality in this surreal moment. Yes, she said, her voice a gentle hum. It was unexpected. My arrival was not meant to be so disruptive. She glanced back at the ship, her expression momentarily thoughtful, before turning her gaze back to him. But perhaps fate had a different plan in mind. Fate, Elliot echoed, confused. His mind was reeling, trying to make sense of what she was saying. Why are you here? Althea took a small step closer, and Elliot instinctively stepped back, though part of him wanted to stay, to let her get even closer. Her smile returned, and this time it was more teasing, as though she could sense his internal struggle, the battle between his curiosity and his nerves. I am here to observe, she said, her tone light and almost playful now, as though the weight of her statement didn't carry the gravity he felt it should. My people, we travel, we study, we learn. Earth is just one of many planets we have visited. Elliot's mind spun. He wanted to ask 1,000 things at once, but one question burned in his chest, one he couldn't ignore, even as she moved closer, almost invading his personal space. Why me? The words slipped out before he could stop them, his voice quiet and uncertain. Why are you here, with me? Althea's eyes softened, and for a moment something shifted in her expression, something that made her seem almost vulnerable. But then, just as quickly as it had appeared, it was gone, replaced by the same seductive confidence she had worn since the moment she stepped out of her ship. Why not you? She asked, her voice lilting. She reached out again, her fingers brushing against his cheek this time, and Elliot's breath caught in his throat. Her touch was like nothing he had ever felt, cool, but not cold, soft, but with a strength beneath it. It made his pulse race. Elliot swallowed hard, trying to steady his thoughts, but it was impossible with her standing so close. He could feel the heat from her body, the way her eyes seemed to draw him in, deeper and deeper and deeper, until he was sure he would drown in those violet depths. "I can feel it," she whispered, her voice barely audible now, as though it was a secret meant only for him. "The way your heart beats faster when I'm near. The way your skin flushes when I touch you." She smiled again, this time a little more wicked, her fingers trailing down the side of his face, sending shivers down his spine. Elliot felt his face flush with heat, embarrassment mixing with the strange, unfamiliar feelings that her touch elicited. He had never felt this way before, so out of control, so vulnerable, and yet there was something intoxicating about it, something that made him want to stay in this moment, to let her keep touching him, to let himself be pulled into whatever strange gravity she possessed. What are you doing?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. He wasn't sure if he was asking her to stop or to continue. Althea tilted her head slightly, her eyes narrowing as she studied him. "I am curious," she said, her voice smooth. "Humans are interesting creatures. So complex, so filled with contradictions. You especially are different." "Different," Elliot echoed, his heart thudding in his chest. "How?" Althea smiled, and this time it was softer, almost sad. For a brief moment her expression shifted, her eyes losing their teasing glint, replaced with something deeper, something Elliot couldn't quite place. "You are innocent," she said, her voice quieter now, more thoughtful. "Untouched by the darkness of your world. Most of your kind is filled with fear, with greed, with anger. But you—" She reached up, her fingers brushing against his temple, and Elliot felt a warmth flood through him, a strange sense of calm settling over his mind. "You are pure." Elliot blinked, trying to process her words. Pure? Innocent? It felt strange to hear those words, especially from someone like her, someone so alien, so beyond anything he had ever known. And yet, the way she said it, the way she looked at him, made him believe it. "I don't," he started, but the words trailed off as her hand moved to his chest, her palm resting over his heart. He could feel the gentle pressure of her touch, the way it seemed to sync with the rapid beating of his heart. "You've never known love," Althea said, her voice soft but firm. "Not the way my people do. Not the way I do." Elliot's breath hitched, his mind swirling with confusion, and something else, something deeper, something more primal. "Love?" he asked, his voice barely audible. Althea's smile deepened, and she leaned in, her face inches from his, her breath warm against his skin. "Yes," she whispered. "Love, desire, connection. Humans think they know these things, but they only scratch the surface. My people, we feel it in ways your kind cannot even imagine." Elliot's pulse raced. He could feel the heat radiating from her, the way her body seemed to hum with energy, with life. His mind screamed at him to step back, to put distance between them, but his body wouldn't move. He was frozen, captivated by her, by the way she looked at him, by the way her touch seemed to ignite something deep within him. And then, before he could even comprehend what was happening, Althea leaned in, her lips brushing against his ear. "Do you want to know?" she whispered, her voice sending a shiver down his spine. "Do you want to feel what I feel?" Elliot's heart pounded, his mind spinning in 1,000 directions. He didn't know what to say, didn't know what to do. But deep down, beneath the confusion and the fear, there was a small part of him that did want to know. That wanted to feel something, anything beyond the quiet, mundane life he had always known. He swallowed hard, his throat dry. "I don't know." Althea smiled against his skin, and he could feel her breath, warm and soft, sending another wave of heat through him. "Don't worry, Elliot," she whispered. "I'll show you." And then, without warning, she pulled back just enough to look into his eyes, her gaze intense, almost overpowering. The world around them seemed to fade away, leaving only the two of them, standing in the middle of the dark forest, bathed in the soft glow of her ship. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Time seemed to stretch, the air between them thick with unspoken tension. And then, slowly, deliberately, Althea leaned in, her lips brushing against his in the softest, most fleeting of kisses. Elliot's world exploded. It was as if every nerve in his body had been set alight, a rush of warmth and electricity flooding through him, overwhelming every sense. His heart raced, his mind reeled, and for a moment he forgot how to breathe. The kiss was brief, barely more than a whisper against his lips, but it left him trembling, his entire body humming with energy. Althea pulled back, her eyes gleaming with something he couldn't quite name, something that made his chest tighten. "Do you feel it now?" she asked softly, her voice filled with a strange mix of tenderness and power. Elliot could only nod, his voice lost to the storm of emotions raging inside him. Althea smiled, her hand still resting on his chest, feeling the rapid beat of his heart beneath her palm. "Good," she whispered. "Because this is only the beginning." The kiss lingered in Elliot's mind long after Althea had pulled away, its phantom touch tingling on his lips like an electric current. His heart thundered in his chest, the weight of what had just happened overwhelming every rational thought. He had never been kissed before, at least, not like this. Certainly not by someone like her. Someone so impossibly beautiful, so otherworldly. For a moment, the night was quiet, and Elliot struggled to find his breath. Althea stood before him, her violet eyes glowing softly in the darkness, her expression calm and unreadable, as though she hadn't just shattered his world with a single touch. The silence between them was thick, almost oppressive, as if the very air had been charged with something new, something alive. Elliot's mind raced, torn between a million thoughts, questions, and emotions that he could barely name. Part of him was terrified of the unknown, of what she was and what this all meant. But there was another part of him, a much quieter part, that longed for more. He had lived his entire life in the quiet comfort of routine, in the safety of predictability. Althea was none of those things. She was a storm, unpredictable and wild, pulling him into a world he had only ever dreamed of. And yet, standing in the glow of her presence, he couldn't help but feel a strange sense of exhilaration. His voice cracked slightly, and he swallowed hard, trying to steady himself. "I don't understand. Why are you doing this? Why? Why me?" Althea's gaze softened, and for a fleeting moment, there was something almost tender in the way she looked at him. She took a step closer, her movements slow and deliberate, as though she were giving him time to process each second, each breath. "I told you, Elliot," she said softly, her voice a gentle hum that seemed to vibrate in the space between them. "There is something about you, something, pure. I find it fascinating." Pure, he echoed the word again, his confusion deepening. He didn't understand what she meant. He was just a regular guy, ordinary, unremarkable. There was nothing special about him. "I'm not." "Yes, you are," Althea interrupted, her voice firm yet soothing. She reached out again, her hand brushing gently against his cheek, and Elliot's breath caught in his throat. Her touch was cool and calming, like the whisper of a breeze on a hot summer day. "You don't see yourself the way I do. You haven't been tainted by the darkness of your world. There is a light in you, Elliot, a light I haven't seen in anyone else." Elliot felt a strange warmth blossom in his chest at her words, but he also felt the weight of their meaning. He didn't know how to respond, how to process the idea that someone, an alien, no less could see something in him that he had never seen in himself. "I don't," his voice trailed off, unsure of what to say. "I don't understand what you mean." Althea's smile returned, but this time it was softer, less predatory than before. She stepped closer still, until there was barely any space left between them. Her presence was overwhelming, her scent, her warmth, the strange magnetic pull of her very being. He couldn't think straight when she was this close, and part of him wondered if that was exactly what she wanted. "Don't worry," she whispered, her voice low and hypnotic. "You will." As the days passed, Elliot found himself increasingly drawn to Althea, though he couldn't explain why. She seemed to appear in his life at the most unexpected times, like a shadow slipping through the cracks of his mundane reality. During the day, he went through the motions of his normal life, helping out at his uncle's bookstore, talking briefly with friends at school, and spending quiet evenings with his telescope on the hill. But Althea was always in the back of his mind, a constant presence he couldn't shake. Every night without fail she would find him. She would appear out of the shadows like a vision, her luminous form glowing softly under the stars, her voice a quiet melody that called to him. And every night they would sit together, talking, though their conversations always seemed to circle back to the same thing, the connection between them. Althea was curious about everything about his life, about humanity, about the emotions he felt so deeply but could barely understand. She asked questions that seemed simple but were laced with a deeper intent, as though she was peeling back the layers of his soul, piece by piece. "Do you ever wonder what's out there?" she asked one night, her gaze fixed on the sky above them. They sat together on the hill, side by side, their shoulders almost touching. Elliot glanced at her, then back up at the stars. He had asked himself that question 1,000 times, though it had always felt more like a rhetorical musing. Now, sitting next to a being from another world, the question felt much more real and much more daunting. All the time, he admitted quietly, "I've always felt like there's something more out there. Something bigger than us. But I never thought I'd actually find out." Althea smiled faintly, her expression thoughtful. "There is more. So much more than you can imagine." Elliot turned to her, curiosity burning in his chest. "Tell me about it. About where you come from." Althea was silent for a moment, her gaze distant, as though she was lost in memories of faraway places. "I come from a place called Eloria," she said softly. "A world filled with light and energy, where emotion and thought are intertwined. My people are. Different from yours. We don't experience the world in the same way. Everything we feel is amplified. Our senses, our desires, our connections with others, they are deeper, more intense." Elliot's mind raced as he tried to picture the world she described, a place where emotions were felt with such intensity that they shaped reality. "And that's why you're here. To study us." Althea nodded, her eyes drifting back to him. "Yes, my mission was to observe, to understand. Your species is at a crossroads, Elliot. You have the potential for greatness, but also for destruction. My people wanted to know if your kind was worth saving." Worth saving, the words hit Elliot like a punch to the gut. "From what?" "From yourselves," Althea said simply, her voice calm but firm. "Your world is fragile, on the brink of something terrible. But there is hope, in beings like you, who still carry light within them." Elliot's stomach twisted at her words. He had always known, on some level, that humanity was flawed, that the world was filled with darkness and cruelty. But hearing it from her, from someone who had seen things beyond his understanding, made it feel more real, more urgent. "But what does that have to do with me?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Althea's gaze softened and she reached out, her fingers brushing lightly against his hand. The touch sent a shiver up his spine, and he found himself holding his breath, waiting for her to speak. "Because you are different, Elliot," she said quietly. "You feel things more deeply than others. You still believe in the goodness of people, even when it seems impossible. That's why I was drawn to you." Elliot's heart raced as her words sank in. He wanted to believe her, but it all felt so overwhelming. Why him? Why, out of all the people in the world, had she chosen him? "I don't know what you see in me," he said, his voice shaky. I'm nobody." Althea smiled, and this time it was warm, almost tender. "You are not nobody, Elliot. You are more than you realize." The nights with Althea grew longer, and Elliot found himself more entangled in her web. She seemed to know exactly how to keep him on edge, how to stir feelings in him that he had never known existed. Her touch was light, almost teasing, and yet it sent waves of heat through his body. Her gaze lingered on him with a knowing glint, as though she could see every thought, every desire that flickered through his mind. And Elliot, he couldn't stop thinking about her. During the day, he would find his mind drifting, replaying their conversations, the way her lips had felt against his, the way her voice seemed to wrap around him like a spell. He was falling for her, he knew it, even if he couldn't fully understand it. But with each passing day, a part of him grew uneasy. There was something about Althea, something beneath the surface, hidden behind her seductive smile and her gentle words. She was alluring, yes, but she was also dangerous. He could feel it in the way she watched him, in the way her touch lingered just a moment too long, in the way she seemed to revel in his innocence. She was toying with him. And yet, even knowing that, Elliot couldn't pull away. He was drawn to her like a moth to a flame, helpless in the face of her beauty, her mystery, her promise of something more. One night, as they sat together on the hill, Althea turned to him, her expression unusually serious. "Elliot, do you trust me?" The question caught him off guard and he hesitated. Did he trust her? He wanted to, but there was a part of him, a small, quiet part, that wasn't sure. I think so," he said finally, his voice uncertain. Althea's eyes darkened slightly, and she reached out, placing her hand over his. "I need to show you something," she said, her voice low. "Something important." Elliot's heart raced, his mind spinning with questions. What is it? Close your eyes, she whispered, her voice soft and commanding at the same time. And trust me. Elliot hesitated for only a moment before he did as she asked, closing his eyes and letting the darkness envelop him. He felt her hand tighten slightly on his, and then, suddenly, the air around them shifted. It was subtle at first, a gentle breeze, a faint hum in the distance. But then, the hum grew louder, and the ground beneath him seemed to fall away. He gasped, his eyes snapping open, only to find that they were no longer on the hill. The world around him had changed, the familiar trees and stars replaced by a vast, glowing landscape that stretched out in every direction. What? Where are we? He whispered, his voice trembling. Althea stood beside him, her expression calm, almost serene. This is a glimpse of my world, she said quietly. Aloria, this is what I wanted to show you. Elliot stared in awe, his breath catching in his throat. The sky above them was a deep, swirling violet, filled with countless stars that seemed to shimmer and dance. The ground beneath his feet was soft and luminous, glowing faintly with an ethereal light. Everything around them pulsed with energy, as though the very air was alive. It's beautiful, he breathed, his mind struggling to comprehend what he was seeing. Yes, Althea said softly, her eyes on him. But it is also dangerous. Elliot tore his gaze away from the sky, turning to look at her. Dangerous? How? Althea's expression darkened, her voice lowering to a near whisper. Because once you've seen this, once you've felt what I feel, there is no going back. Her words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. Elliot's heart pounded in his chest. He didn't fully understand what she meant, but he could feel the weight of her words, the gravity of the moment pressing down on him. He was standing on the edge of something vast, something unknown, and he wasn't sure if he was ready to fall. I'm not like you, Althea, he said quietly, his voice trembling slightly. I'm just human. Althea smiled, but there was a sadness in her eyes. Yes, she whispered, but that's what makes you so special. And with that, she reached out, her hand brushing lightly against his chest, right over his heart. In that moment, Elliot felt a rush of heat flood through him, an overwhelming wave of emotion that took his breath away. It was as if every feeling he had ever buried deep inside him was suddenly brought to the surface: fear, desire, hope, love colliding in a chaotic swirl of sensation. He gasped, his body trembling, as he struggled to process the intensity of it all. Althea's touch was gentle, but the emotions she stirred in him were anything but. Do you feel it, Elliot? She whispered, her voice like a soft breeze against his skin. This is what I wanted to show you. The depth of connection, the intensity of emotion. This is what I feel. This is what we could have. Elliot's mind spun, his heart pounding in his chest. It was too much, too fast, too intense. And yet, deep down, a part of him wanted it. He wanted her. But at what cost? The air around Elliot hummed with a strange, otherworldly energy, a pulse that echoed through his chest, deep into his bones. The glow of Aloria's sky cast an ethereal light on his face, the violet and silver hues swirling in the atmosphere above him. He stood frozen, staring out at this alien world. Althea had revealed to him a place so beautiful, so vast, that it defied comprehension. The ground beneath his feet was soft, like the plushest grass, yet it shimmered with a faint, bioluminescent glow, as though the very soil was alive. Aloria was breathtaking. But it was also overwhelming, an assault on every one of his senses. The air was rich and fragrant, filled with strange, intoxicating scents that made his head spin. The distant hum in the atmosphere vibrated in his chest, a sound that wasn't quite music but more like the living pulse of the planet itself. And the colors he'd never seen before, swirling in patterns that seemed impossible, like the fabric of reality itself was bending and shifting. He turned to look at Althea, who stood beside him, her glowing violet eyes locked on his. She looked almost serene here, more at home in this strange alien landscape than she ever had on Earth. Her silver hair shimmered in the ambient light, her entire being seeming to merge with the very essence of the world around her. This is Aloria, Elliot whispered, his voice small, as if he was afraid that speaking too loudly would shatter the fragile beauty of the moment. Althea nodded, her gaze soft but intense. A glimpse of it, she corrected. Aloria exists far beyond the physical realm, you know. What you see now is only a projection, a reflection of its true form. Elliot struggled to wrap his mind around that. A projection? This world felt so real, so vivid, that it was hard to believe it wasn't the actual thing. But as he stared out at the swirling sky, the rolling hills that glowed faintly in the distance, he realized there was something intangible about it all, something dreamlike, as though the landscape itself was in flux, shifting subtly every time he blinked. "It's beautiful," he breathed, unable to take his eyes off the alien world. "But how is this possible? How are we here?" "We aren't here," Althea replied, her voice calm, as though this sort of thing were perfectly natural. "Our minds are still on Earth, but I've brought you into the Elorian plane of consciousness. It's a form of sharing, a connection between our minds." Elliot blinked, trying to absorb what she was saying. A connection. His heart skipped a beat as he glanced at her. "You mean, you're inside my head?" Althea smiled faintly, her lips curving upward in that teasing, mysterious way that always set his nerves on edge. In a way, she said softly, "I'm sharing a part of myself with you, and you with me. It's more than just thoughts or images. It's emotions, feelings, experiences. You're seeing Eloria through my eyes, feeling it through my senses." Elliot's breath hitched in his throat. That explained the overwhelming sensations, the way everything around him felt so alive, so intense. It wasn't just the world he was experiencing, it was her world, her emotions, her perceptions. He was feeling Eloria the way she felt it, and it was almost too much to handle. His gaze drifted back to the landscape, his mind spinning with 1,000 questions. "So this is where you're from?" he asked, his voice quieter now, more reverent. "This is what your home is like?" Althea's expression shifted, a flicker of something unreadable passing through her eyes. "Yes," she said, but there was a hint of sadness in her voice, a weight that hadn't been there before, though it's not the way it used to be. Elliot frowned, his curiosity piqued. "What do you mean?" For a moment Althea hesitated, her gaze distant as she looked out at the alien landscape. Then, slowly, she turned back to him, her eyes softening as she spoke. "My people, the Elorians, are not like humans," she began, her voice carrying a quiet melancholy. "We are beings of energy, of emotion. Our world thrives on the connections we form, the bonds between our minds and hearts. But over time we lost something. We became too focused on logic, on knowledge. We forgot the importance of emotion, of feeling." Elliot listened intently, the weight of her words sinking in. He could hear the sorrow in her voice, the regret. It was a strange thing, hearing an alien speak about emotions in such a human way, but there was no denying the sincerity in her tone. "Now my people are divided," Althea continued. "Some of us, like myself, still believe in the power of emotion, in the connections we form with others. But many have turned away from that, embracing cold logic and detachment. They believe that emotion weakens us, that it clouds our judgment." Elliot's chest tightened as he watched her, his heart aching for reasons he didn't fully understand. "And what do you believe?" Althea's gaze locked onto his, and for a moment the intensity of her stare took his breath away. "I believe in the power of emotion," she said quietly, her voice filled with a quiet conviction. "I believe that connection is the most powerful force in the universe. That's why I'm here, Elliot. That's why I sought you out." Elliot's heart raced, a strange warmth blooming in his chest. "Me," he whispered, feeling the weight of her words settle over him. "But why? Why me?" Althea's lips curled into a small, enigmatic smile. "Because you are different, Elliot. You are still untainted by the darkness of your world. You feel things deeply, purely. You haven't been corrupted by the fear and hatred that plagues so many of your kind. That is why I was drawn to you." Elliot's mind reeled as he tried to process what she was saying. He had always felt different, like he didn't quite fit in with the rest of the world. But he had never imagined that something like Althea would see that in him. That she would choose him out of all the people in the world. "I don't know what to say," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. I'm nobody." Althea's smile softened and she reached out, gently brushing her fingers against his cheek. Her touch was cool, but it sent a wave of warmth through him, a strange, soothing sensation that made his heart race. "You are not nobody," she said softly. "You are more than you realize." Elliot's breath caught in his throat, and for a moment he couldn't tear his eyes away from hers. There was something in her gaze, something deep and unspoken, something that tugged at his very soul. He felt as though she could see straight through him, peeling back the layers of his mind and heart, until there was nothing left but the raw, vulnerable core of who he was. It was terrifying. And yet, it was exhilarating. But as much as he wanted to stay in this moment, in this strange, beautiful world she had shown him, there was a question burning in the back of his mind, one he couldn't ignore any longer. "What happens now?" he asked quietly, his voice trembling slightly. "What? What do you want from me?" Althea's expression darkened slightly, her gaze turning more serious. "That depends on you," she said softly. "There is much more I could show you, Elliot, much more you could learn. But it comes at a price." A price? Elliot's heart skipped a beat, a cold tendril of fear creeping up his spine. What kind of price? Althea hesitated for a moment, her gaze dropping to the ground. "The connection we share." She began, her voice low and measured. "It is powerful. But it is also dangerous. Once you've experienced the depth of emotion I've shown you, once you've felt what it means to truly connect with someone on this level, you can never go back." Elliot's stomach twisted. "Never go back," he echoed, his voice barely above a whisper. "What do you mean?" Althea's gaze lifted to meet his, her eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and something else, something deeper, more intense. "You will be changed, Elliot. Forever. You will feel things more deeply, more intensely than you ever have before. And once that door is opened, it cannot be closed." Elliot's mind spun as he tried to process her words. Was she saying that if he continued down this path, he would never be able to live a normal life again? That he would be forever altered by this connection they shared? "But why?" he asked, his voice trembling. "Why would I want that?" Althea's gaze softened, and she stepped closer, her hand once again reaching out to touch his cheek. "Because once you've felt it, once you've experienced the depth of emotion, the intensity of connection, you will understand. You will see the world in a way you never have before. It is both a gift and a curse." Elliot's chest tightened, his heart pounding in his ears. He wasn't sure if he was ready for this, for the weight of what she was offering. But at the same time, he couldn't deny the pull he felt toward her, the magnetic attraction that seemed to draw him deeper and deeper into her world. "I don't know if I can do this," he admitted quietly, his voice trembling. "I don't know if I'm strong enough." Althea smiled gently, her fingers brushing lightly against his skin. "You are stronger than you realize, Elliot," she whispered. "And you don't have to make this decision now, but when the time comes you will know what to do." Over the following days, Elliot's world seemed to shift, tilting on an axis he could no longer control. Althea's presence was constant, her voice a soft murmur in the back of his mind, her touch lingering in the air, even when she wasn't there. She had opened something inside him, awakened something that he couldn't quite name, a longing, a need for more than the ordinary, more than the life he had always known. He found himself thinking about her constantly, replaying their conversations, their connection, over and over in his mind. It was intoxicating, this new world she had shown him, and yet it was terrifying. The emotions he felt were sharper now, more intense, and he couldn't help but wonder if this was what Althea had warned him about. Was this the beginning of the change she had spoken of? One night, as they sat together on the hill, Althea turned to him, her gaze more serious than he had ever seen it. "There is something you need to understand, Elliot," she said softly. "This connection we share. It's not just about us, it's about your world, your people. The Elorians have been watching Earth for a long time, studying your kind, trying to understand if humanity is ready to evolve." Elliot frowned, his heart skipping a beat. "Evolve? What do you mean?" Althea hesitated for a moment, then spoke quietly, her voice filled with a gravity that sent chills down his spine. "Humanity is at a crossroads. You have the potential for greatness, but also for destruction. My people want to know if your kind is ready to transcend, to join the greater universe. But there is a darkness in humanity, a greed, a violence that could destroy everything." Elliot's stomach twisted as her words sank in. "And what does that have to do with me?" Althea's gaze softened and she reached out, taking his hand in hers. "Because you are different, Elliot. You represent the hope that my people believe still exists in humanity. You are the light in the darkness. That's why I chose you." Elliot's heart raced as he stared at her, his mind spinning with the weight of what she was saying. He had never thought of himself as special, as someone who could make a difference in the world. But now, with Althea standing before him, her eyes filled with a quiet conviction, he couldn't help but wonder if maybe, just maybe, she was right. "What happens now?" he asked quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. Althea's lips curled into a small, enigmatic smile. Now, Elliot, you must decide. Will you embrace this connection? Will you open yourself to the truth of who you are, of what you could become? Or will you turn away? Elliot's chest tightened as he realized the weight of the decision before him. This was more than just about his feelings for Althea. This was about something far greater, about the future of humanity, about his place in the universe. And in that moment, Elliot knew that his life would never be the same. The days after Althea's revelation were a blur of tension, confusion, and growing fear. Elliot felt the weight of the universe pressing down on him, a force he hadn't asked for, pulling him in two directions, one toward Althea, and one toward the quiet, simple life he had known before. He had always been an outsider in his own world, but now he felt even more disconnected from everything familiar. Nothing seemed real anymore, not even the earth beneath his feet.
As he went about his day-to-day life, attending school, working at his uncle's bookstore, interacting with the same people he had known all his life, he felt an increasing sense of alienation. The ordinary world around him seemed dull and distant, like a faded memory of a dream. His friends laughed, talked about trivial things, made plans for the future, but none of it mattered to Elliot anymore. His future felt uncertain, hanging in the balance between two entirely different worlds. One was his, and the other was hers.
Every night Althea was there, waiting for him on the hill, her presence as constant and alluring as the stars. And every night their connection deepened, the pull between them growing stronger, more irresistible. But with that pull came a shadow of doubt, a dark cloud that hovered just out of sight. Elliot could feel the tension building, a sense that something was coming, something that could shatter everything. He couldn't shake the feeling that Althea was hiding something from him, something important, something dangerous. One evening, as they sat together on the hill, the air unusually still, Althea broke the silence.
"You've been quiet lately," she said softly, her voice carrying a subtle edge of concern. "Is something troubling you?"
Elliot hesitated, his fingers nervously fidgeting with a blade of grass. He had been wrestling with his thoughts for days, torn between the intensity of his feelings for her and the nagging fear that something was wrong. He had trusted her with so much of himself already, but the weight of her world, her mission, it was suffocating him. "Althea," he began, his voice shaky, "I need to know. What aren't you telling me?" She turned to him, her glowing violet eyes narrowing slightly. There was a flicker of something in her expression, surprise, maybe even a touch of sadness, but she quickly masked it with her usual calm demeanor. "What do you mean?" Elliot looked away, struggling to find the right words. I feel like there's something you're not saying, something important. You keep talking about this connection we have, about how I'm different, how I could help your people decide the future of humanity. But what does that actually mean? What aren't you telling me?"
Althea's gaze softened, and she sighed, turning her eyes back toward the dark horizon. For a long moment she was silent, her features bathed in the soft light of the distant stars. When she finally spoke, her voice was quieter, more vulnerable than he had ever heard it. "You're right, Elliot," she admitted, her words careful, measured. "There is something I haven't told you. I've wanted to, but I wasn't sure you were ready."
Elliot's heart raced, his mind spinning with possibilities. "What is it?" Althea closed her eyes for a moment, as though gathering her thoughts. When she opened them again, there was a sadness there, something ancient and heavy. "My people, the Elorians, are divided. We were once a unified race, connected through our shared emotions and energy, but over time that connection weakened. Some of us, like me, still believe in the power of emotion, of love, of empathy. But there are others, many others, who believe that emotion is a weakness, that it clouds our judgment." Elliot frowned, the pieces of her story starting to come together in his mind. "And those others, they don't want to save humanity, do they?"
Althea shook her head slowly, her expression grim. "No, they see your kind as dangerous, chaotic. They believe that humans are too volatile, too driven by greed and fear. They think that allowing humanity to join the greater universe would be a mistake."
Elliot felt a cold knot of dread form in his stomach. "And you? What do you think?" Althea turned to him, her eyes locking onto his with an intensity that took his breath away. "I believe in you, Elliot," she said firmly. "I believe that humanity can be more than what my people fear. But I'm not the one who gets to decide."
His heart pounded in his chest as her words sunk in. "Then who does?
Althea hesitated again, her gaze dropping to the ground. The elders, she whispered, almost bitterly. The ones who lead my people. They are the ones who will make the final decision about Earth's fate, and if they decide that humanity is too dangerous, they will act. Elliot's breath caught in his throat. Act? What do you mean? Althea's expression darkened, and for the first time, Elliot saw a flash of fear in her eyes. They will end it. They will ensure that humanity never has the chance to pose a threat. The words hit Elliot like a punch to the gut, knocking the wind out of him. He stared at her, his mind reeling, struggling to process what she was saying. End it, you mean? They'll destroy us. Althea nodded slowly, her voice barely a whisper. Yes. A heavy silence fell between them, the weight of her words hanging in the air like a storm cloud. Elliot's mind raced, his thoughts a chaotic swirl of fear, anger, and disbelief. He had always known that Althea's world was far beyond his understanding, but this was something else entirely. The fate of humanity rested in the hands of beings he couldn't even begin to comprehend, and the woman sitting beside him was caught in the middle of it all. You're telling me that if the elders decide we're not worthy, they'll just wipe us out? His voice trembled with disbelief and fear. Like we're nothing. Althea winced at the harshness in his tone, but she didn't shy away. Yes, she said quietly. But that's why I came here, Elliot. That's why I chose you. I believe you can help me show them that humanity is worth saving. Elliot stared at her, his mind a whirlwind of emotions. The enormity of what she was asking, what she was revealing, was staggering. He had always thought that the future of the world was in the hands of politicians, scientists, and people much smarter and more powerful than him. But now, here he was, a 19-year-old boy from a small town, being told that the fate of his entire species rested on his shoulders.
How am I supposed to do that? He asked, his voice filled with desperation. I'm just one person. How can I possibly change their minds? Althea's gaze softened, and she reached out, gently taking his hand in hers. Her touch was cool, but it sent a wave of warmth through him, a strange comfort in the face of the impossible. You don't have to do it alone, she whispered. I'm with you. Together we can show them what makes humanity special, what makes you special.
Elliot swallowed hard, his throat tight with emotion. He wanted to believe her, but the weight of it all felt too much to bear. He wasn't a hero, wasn't someone capable of saving the world. He was just a kid. And yet, when he looked into Althea's eyes, saw the trust and hope shining there, something deep inside him stirred.
I don't know if I'm strong enough for this, he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper.
Althea squeezed his hand gently, her touch firm, reassuring. You are stronger than you think, Elliot. And I'm not asking you to save the world by yourself. I'm asking you to help me show my people that there is hope, that there is light in the darkness. Elliot's heart raced as he looked at her, his mind still spinning. Could he really do this? Could he really be the person she believed him to be? I'll try, he said quietly, his voice filled with uncertainty, but also determination. I don't know if I can, but I'll try. Althea smiled, a soft, almost relieved smile, and for the first time in days, Elliot felt a flicker of hope. But even as that hope began to bloom, a shadow loomed over their connection. The night after their conversation on the hill, Althea didn't appear. Elliot waited, sitting on the grass beneath the stars, his heart heavy with a growing sense of unease. She had never missed a night before. Every evening since their first meeting, she had found him here, guiding him into her world, teaching him about the connection they shared.
But tonight, the hill was empty, the air unnervingly still.
Elliot's mind raced with possibilities, his thoughts darting between fear and frustration. Had something happened to her? Was she in danger? Or had she finally decided that he wasn't worth the risk, that he wasn't the person she needed him to be? His chest tightened at the thought, a painful knot of worry and guilt forming in his stomach.
He tried to focus on the stars, to find comfort in their familiar, distant light, but it was no use. His mind kept drifting back to Althea, to the weight of her words, to the fear in her eyes when she spoke of the elders. What if they had already made their decision? What if they had decided that humanity wasn't worth saving, and now it was too late? As the minutes turned into hours, Elliot's frustration began to boil over, a sharp edge of anger cutting through the worry. He stood abruptly, running a hand through his hair, his breath coming in short, uneven bursts.
"Where are you?" he muttered under his breath, his voice filled with a mix of fear and desperation. "You can't just disappear like this." And then, as if in answer to his unspoken plea, a soft, familiar hum filled the air. Elliot's heart leapt in his chest, his pulse quickening as he turned toward the source of the sound. At the edge of the forest, a faint glow appeared, growing brighter with each passing second. His breath caught in his throat as he recognized the silvery light. It was Althea.
But something was different.
As she stepped out from the shadows, her usual calm and serene demeanor was replaced by something darker, more urgent. Her violet eyes were wide, filled with a fear that Elliot had never seen before. Her glowing skin seemed dimmer, as though the light within her had been dulled. "Althea," Elliot called out, his voice trembling with concern. "What's wrong?" She moved quickly toward him, her expression grim. "We don't have much time," she said, her voice tight with anxiety. "The elders have discovered my connection with you. They know what I've been doing." Elliot's blood ran cold. "What does that mean?" Althea glanced over her shoulder, as if expecting something or someone to appear from the shadows. "It means they're coming for me. They're coming to stop me."
Panic surged through Elliot's veins, his mind spinning. "Stop you? Why? What are they going to do?"
Althea's expression hardened, and for the first time he saw the fierce determination in her eyes. "They don't want me to show them the truth about humanity. They don't want me to prove that there's hope. They think I've grown too attached, that I've lost my objectivity." Elliot's chest tightened with fear. "What are we supposed to do?" Althea took a deep breath, her gaze locking onto his. "We have to leave. Now. If we stay here, they'll find us, and they'll stop me from completing what we've started." "Leave?" Elliot's heart raced. "But where will we go?" She stepped closer, her hand reaching out to take his. "We'll go to the one place they can't follow us. My ship will go to Eloria." Elliot's mind reeled. Leave Earth? Go to Eloria? The thought seemed impossible, unreal. But as he looked into Althea's eyes, saw the urgency and fear there, he knew he didn't have a choice. If they stayed, they would both be in danger. "I'll go with you," he said, his voice trembling but resolute. "I'll go."
Althea's expression softened for a moment, a flicker of relief passing over her face. "Thank you, Elliot. I knew I could trust you."
Without another word, she turned and led him toward the forest, toward the place where her ship had landed all those nights ago. As they moved through the trees, the hum of her ship grew louder, the soft glow of its metallic surface coming into view. Elliot's heart pounded in his chest as they approached, the reality of what was happening sinking in. He was about to leave Earth, about to step into an entirely different world, Althea's world. But even as the fear gripped him, there was a strange sense of excitement, a thrill that came with the unknown. He didn't know what awaited them on Eloria or what the future held for humanity. But he knew one thing for certain. He wasn't turning back. The night air was thick with tension as Althea led Elliot through the dense forest, the trees casting long, eerie shadows in the soft glow of her ship's light. His heart pounded in his chest, the weight of the decision he had just made settling over him like a heavy cloak. Every step he took felt surreal, as though he were moving through a dream he wasn't sure he wanted to wake up from. Althea's grip on his hand was firm but gentle, guiding him through the underbrush with a quiet urgency that set his nerves on edge. Her usual calm demeanor had been replaced with something far more intense: anxiety, perhaps even fear. It was strange to see her like this, to see her composed, ethereal presence crack under the weight of the danger that loomed over them both. As they neared the clearing where her ship lay, Elliot's mind raced with questions, each one more terrifying than the last. Would they make it to Eloria safely? What awaited them once they got there? And most pressing of all, what would happen to him? He was about to leave Earth, the only world he had ever known, to journey to a place he could barely comprehend, all because of a connection with an alien girl who had pulled him into something far beyond his understanding. A part of him still couldn't believe any of it was real, yet the weight of Althea's hand in his, the soft hum of her ship as they approached, and the raw urgency in her voice all reminded him that this was happening. "Are you sure about this?" he asked, his voice quiet but filled with tension. He didn't want to doubt her, but the enormity of what they were about to do was starting to overwhelm him. Althea glanced back at him, her glowing violet eyes softening for a brief moment. "I'm sure," she said, though her voice was tinged with a quiet resolve. "It's the only way." The only way. Those words echoed in his mind, and though he didn't fully understand what they meant, he knew there was no turning back now. They emerged into the clearing, and there, nestled in the center of a blackened crater, was Althea's ship. It looked as alien and otherworldly as it had the first time Elliot had seen it, sleek, metallic, and glowing with an iridescent light that seemed to pulse like a living heart. The ship hummed softly, as though it had been waiting for this moment. Althea released his hand and stepped forward, raising one arm toward the vessel. A thin beam of light shot out from the ship's surface, scanning over her form before the hatch hissed open with a faint rush of air. The door slid upward, revealing a dark interior illuminated by faint, shifting lights. For a moment Elliot just stood there, staring at the open hatch. The sight of it, the cold, alien glow of the ship's interior, sent a chill down his spine. This was it. This was the point of no return. If he stepped inside, there was no telling what would happen next. Althea must have sensed his hesitation because she turned to him, her expression softening. "Elliot," she said gently, her voice pulling him from his thoughts. "I know this is overwhelming. I know you're scared. But I promise you, I won't let anything happen to you." He met her gaze, and for a moment, the fear in his chest loosened just enough for him to breathe. There was something in her eyes, something raw and real, that gave him the strength to push past the doubt and the fear. Althea had risked everything to come to him, to connect with him, to show him the truth about her world and the danger that faced his. He couldn't back down now. Swallowing hard, Elliot nodded. "Okay," he said, his voice shaky but resolute. "Let's go." Althea smiled, just a small, fleeting smile, but it was enough to ease the tightness in his chest. She stepped toward the open hatch, glancing over her shoulder to make sure he was following. He hesitated for only a moment before taking a deep breath and stepping into the ship behind her. The interior of the vessel was unlike anything Elliot had ever seen. The walls seemed to shimmer with a metallic sheen, and faint, swirling lights danced across the surfaces, illuminating the space with an otherworldly glow. The air inside was cool, with a faint, sterile scent that reminded him of something between ozone and electricity. It wasn't large, at least, not by his standards. The ship's interior was sleek, minimalist, with no obvious controls or panels, just smooth, seamless walls and a central platform that pulsed with soft light. Althea moved gracefully through the space, her fingers brushing against the walls as though they were familiar to her. Elliot followed closely behind, his eyes darting around the room as he tried to take in every detail. It was strange, so strange, but at the same time, there was something oddly comforting about the ship. It felt like an extension of Althea, like a part of her world that she had invited him into. "This ship is incredible," Elliot said quietly, his voice filled with awe. "I've never seen anything like it." Althea glanced back at him, a small smile tugging at her lips. "It's not just a ship," she explained. "It's alive, in a way. It responds to me, to my energy. That's why it brought me here. When I first landed, it sensed the connection I had formed with you." Elliot's heart skipped a beat at her words. The idea that the ship had somehow recognized their connection, had chosen to bring her to him, was both thrilling and terrifying. It made everything feel even more inevitable, as though this moment had been written in the stars long before either of them had realized it. Althea stepped onto the central platform, and the swirling lights in the room grew brighter, casting an ethereal glow around them. She gestured for him to join her, and Elliot hesitated for only a second before stepping onto the platform beside her. As soon as his feet touched the surface, the ship responded. A soft hum filled the air, and the lights around them shifted, forming patterns that seemed to ripple through the walls like waves of energy. Elliot's pulse quickened, his breath catching in his throat. This was it, they were about to leave. "Close your eyes," Althea whispered, her voice soft but commanding. "Trust me." Elliot did as she asked, closing his eyes and taking a deep breath. He could feel the air around him change, the subtle hum of the ship growing louder, more intense. And then, suddenly, there was a sensation of weightlessness, as though the ground beneath him had fallen away. His heart raced, but he kept his eyes shut, trusting Althea's presence beside him to anchor him. For a moment there was nothing but the hum, the strange, otherworldly vibrations that seemed to fill his entire body. And then, just as quickly as it had begun, the sensation shifted. The hum faded, replaced by a quiet stillness that felt almost peaceful. "You can open your eyes now," Althea's voice broke the silence. Elliot hesitated, his pulse still racing, but slowly, he opened his eyes. The sight that greeted him was beyond anything he had ever imagined. They were no longer inside the ship, not exactly. The room around them had transformed into something else, something far more expansive. The walls had disappeared, replaced by a vast, open space that stretched out in every direction. The floor beneath them shimmered like liquid silver, and the sky above them was an endless expanse of swirling colors, deep violets, electric blues, and shimmering golds, all blending together in a cosmic dance. And there, hanging in the sky above them, was Aloria. It was breathtaking. The planet glowed with an otherworldly light, its surface a tapestry of shimmering cities, vast oceans, and swirling clouds that sparkled like stardust. It was unlike any world Elliot had ever seen alive, vibrant, pulsing with energy. He could feel it, even from this distance, as though the very essence of the planet was reaching out to him, calling to him. "We're not there yet," Althea said softly, her voice pulling him back to the present. "This is a projection, a glimpse of Aloria. The ship is taking us there, but I wanted you to see it first." Elliot's breath caught in his throat as he stared at the planet, unable to tear his eyes away. It was beautiful, so impossibly beautiful that it made his heart ache. He had always dreamed of other worlds, of distant stars and far-off galaxies, but nothing had prepared him for this. Nothing could have. "It's incredible," he whispered, his voice filled with awe. "I can't believe I'm really seeing it." Althea stepped closer to him, her hand brushing lightly against his. "I wanted you to see it through my eyes," she said quietly. "Before we arrive, I wanted you to understand what's at stake." Elliot turned to her, his heart pounding in his chest. "What do you mean?" Althea's gaze darkened, her expression growing serious. "Aloria is more than just a planet. It's a living, breathing entity, connected to every one of my people. The energy of our emotions, our thoughts, our connections, it fuels the planet, keeps it alive. But over time that connection has weakened. My people have grown distant, cold. The elders believe that emotions are dangerous, that they make us weak. They've closed themselves off, and in doing so, they've begun to suffocate Aloria." Elliot's heart sank as her words sank in. "But if that's true, then—" "They believe that humanity is a reflection of what we've become," Althea continued, her voice heavy with sorrow. "They see your world as chaotic, driven by fear and greed. They think that if humanity joins the greater universe, it will bring only destruction." Elliot's chest tightened. "And you don't agree?" Althea shook her head. "No, I believe that humanity is capable of more. I believe that the connection you and I share is proof of that." Elliot stared at her, his mind spinning. The weight of what she was saying was staggering. His connection with her, it wasn't just about the two of them. It was about something far greater, something that could determine the fate of both their worlds. "What are the elders going to do?" he asked quietly, his voice trembling with fear. Althea hesitated for a moment, then spoke softly. "They will try to stop us. They will try to end this connection before it can grow any stronger. If they succeed, they will decide that humanity is a threat." Elliot's blood ran cold. "And if they decide that—" Althea's gaze darkened, her voice barely above a whisper. "Then they will destroy your world." The words hit him like a punch to the gut, knocking the wind out of him. He had known there was danger, but hearing it spoken so plainly, so definitively, was something else entirely. The fate of his entire planet, his family, his friends. It all hung in the balance. He took a deep breath, trying to steady himself, to push past the fear. "So what do we do?" he asked, his voice firmer now, filled with determination. Althea stepped closer to him, her hand reaching out to take his. "We show them the truth," she said quietly. "We show them that love, that connection, is not a weakness, that it's what makes us strong." Elliot's heart pounded in his chest as he looked at her, at the planet shimmering in the sky above them. It all felt so impossible, so overwhelming. But when he looked into Althea's eyes, he saw something else: hope. And that was enough. "I'm with you," he said softly. "Whatever happens, I'm with you." Althea smiled, a small, tender smile, and for a moment, the fear in his chest loosened. "We're almost there," she whispered, her voice filled with quiet resolve. "Hold on, Elliot. We're almost there." The ship's descent was smooth, almost effortless. The projection of Eloria faded, replaced by the real thing as they neared the planet's surface. Elliot stood beside Althea, his heart racing as the ship entered the atmosphere, the shimmering lights of Eloria's cities coming into focus below. It was breathtaking, even more so now that they were so close. The cities sparkled like constellations, vast and sprawling, their architecture sleek and otherworldly. Towering structures of light and metal rose up from the ground, connected by intricate networks of energy that pulsed with a soft, rhythmic glow. But as they descended, Elliot noticed something else, something darker. The energy that surrounded the cities, that pulsed through the planet itself, seemed dimmer than before. It was still beautiful, still alive, but there was a heaviness to it, a weight that pressed down on the atmosphere like a storm cloud. He could feel it, a subtle tension that hummed in the air, growing stronger as they neared the surface. Althea's expression grew more serious as the ship touched down, her gaze fixed on the distant horizon. "We don't have much time," she said quietly. "The elders will know we've arrived." Elliot swallowed hard, his pulse quickening. "What do we do?" Althea turned to him, her eyes filled with determination. "We go to them. We show them the truth." Elliot nodded, his heart pounding. He didn't know what would happen next. He didn't know if they would succeed, if they would even survive. But he knew one thing for certain. He wasn't turning back. Together they stepped off the ship, into the heart of Eloria. The air on Eloria was unlike anything Elliot had ever felt before. It was dense, almost electric, charged with an energy that pulsed through his skin, into his bones, and deep into his soul. He could feel the planet beneath him, alive with power like a living, breathing entity, tethered to its people. The connection was overwhelming, intoxicating, yet there was something else, a tension, a pressure that weighed on everything, like the planet itself was holding its breath. As Elliot and Althea stepped off the ship and into the heart of Eloria, he could feel eyes on them, unseen, but everywhere. The vast, shimmering city stretched out before them, its towers gleaming in the soft light of the swirling, violet sky. Thin, radiant lines of energy crisscrossed the air, connecting the buildings, pulsing like veins carrying the lifeblood of the world. It was beautiful, awe-inspiring, but there was a darkness to it now, a coldness that lingered beneath the surface. Althea stood beside him, her expression unreadable, though Elliot could sense the tension in her posture. She had told him about the divide in her people, the growing belief among the elders that emotions were a weakness, a liability. And now they were here on her home planet, about to face the very beings who could decide the fate of Earth. Elliot's heart pounded in his chest, a mixture of fear, excitement, and uncertainty flooding his veins. He had no idea what to expect, no idea what they would say or do when they confronted the elders. All he knew was that everything his world, Althea's world, their connection hung in the balance. Althea turned to him, her eyes softening for a brief moment as they locked onto his. "Stay close to me," she said quietly. "No matter what happens, stay by my side." Elliot nodded, his throat too tight to speak. He couldn't help but wonder what "no matter what happens" might mean. What dangers awaited them? What if the elders rejected him? What if Althea's efforts to protect humanity, his humanity, failed? But there was no time for more questions. Althea gestured toward the center of the city, where a massive structure loomed in the distance, rising high into the sky. Its surface shimmered with a dark, metallic sheen, and energy flowed from it like the heart of the city, pulsing outward through the intricate web of glowing lines. "That's the council tower," Althea explained as they started toward it. "It's where the elders reside, where they make decisions for our people." Elliot's stomach twisted with nerves as they walked, his footsteps echoing softly in the stillness of the city. The streets were eerily quiet, there were no crowds, no bustling life, just the occasional flicker of light or the faint hum of energy in the air. It was as if the whole city was watching them, waiting. The closer they got to the council tower, the more the tension in the air grew. Elliot could feel it pressing down on him like a weight on his chest, squeezing the air from his lungs. Althea walked ahead of him, her shoulders tense, her eyes focused on the tower. She was calm, but Elliot could sense the strain beneath her composed exterior. She was scared, too. Scared of what was coming.
Finally, they reached the base of the tower. The entrance was grand, framed by towering pillars of glowing light that seemed to hum with the pulse of the planet. A soft, shimmering barrier of energy flickered in front of them, sealing the entrance. Althea stepped forward, raising her hand, and the barrier dissolved, parting like mist before her. She looked back at Elliot, her eyes meeting his for a brief moment before she led him inside.
The interior of the tower was vast, an open chamber, filled with swirling light and shadows. The walls were lined with intricate patterns of energy, glowing softly in the dimness. In the center of the room, a raised platform hovered above the ground, surrounded by streams of light that flowed upward, disappearing into the darkness above. And there, on the platform, stood the elders. They were tall, their forms ethereal and glowing, like beings made of light and energy. Their faces were obscured by shimmering veils of luminescence, but Elliot could feel their gaze on him, cold and piercing. There were 6 of them, arranged in a half-circle, their presence commanding and unnerving. Elliot's breath caught in his throat as he stared up at them, his heart pounding. This was it. These were the beings who held the fate of humanity in their hands. Althea stepped forward, her voice calm and steady, though Elliot could hear the undercurrent of tension in her words. "Elder," she began, her tone formal but respectful. "I come before you today to present my case. I believe that humanity is worth saving, that they are capable of more than you realize. And I have brought proof." The elders remained silent, their glowing forms unmoving, but the air in the chamber seemed to thicken with a strange, oppressive energy. Finally, one of them spoke, their voice a deep, resonant echo that seemed to reverberate through the very walls of the tower. "You have defied our orders," Althea the elder said, their tone cold and dispassionate. "You were sent to observe, not to interfere. Yet you have formed a connection with this human and emotional bond that clouds your judgment." Althea straightened, her voice firm but respectful. "I did what I believed was necessary. Humanity is at a crossroads, and I could not stand by and let them be judged without understanding their potential. I formed a connection with Elliot because I believe he represents what humanity can become." There was a long, heavy silence. The elders did not move, did not speak, but Elliot could feel their eyes, those unseen, piercing eyes focused on him. He felt exposed, vulnerable, as though they were peeling back the layers of his mind, searching for something hidden deep within him. Finally, another elder spoke, their voice just as cold, just as distant. "Humans are dangerous. They are ruled by fear, by greed, by violence. They have already begun to destroy their own world, and you believe they are worthy of joining the greater universe." "Yes," Althea said, her voice unwavering. "I believe they are capable of more. I believe that with the right guidance, humanity can overcome its flaws and become something greater. And I have seen it in Elliot." Elliot's heart pounded in his chest, his hands trembling at his sides. He hadn't expected to be the focus of the conversation. He had thought that Althea would do the talking, would convince the elders with her words. But now, as their gaze turned to him, he realized that they were looking for something more. "Elliot," one of the elders said, their voice softer, though no less intimidating, "step forward." Elliot swallowed hard, his legs feeling weak beneath him, but he forced himself to take a step forward. The room seemed to close in around him, the weight of their gaze pressing down on him from all sides. "You have formed a connection with Althea," the elder continued. "A connection that transcends the boundaries of our worlds. Why?" The question caught him off guard, and for a moment Elliot didn't know how to respond. Why? Why had he formed this connection with her? Why had he let himself be drawn into this strange, otherworldly bond that defied everything he had ever known? But as he looked at Althea, standing there beside him, her eyes filled with hope and fear, the answer became clear. "Because I love her," Elliot said quietly, his voice trembling but honest. "I didn't plan it, I didn't expect it, but I love her." The words hung in the air, and for a moment there was nothing but silence. The elders remained still, their glowing forms unreadable, but the energy in the room seemed to shift, growing heavier, more intense. "You speak of love," another elder said, their voice thoughtful, almost curious. "But what is love to a human? How can something so fleeting, so fragile, transcend the chaos of your world?" Elliot took a deep breath, his mind racing. He didn't know how to explain it, how to put into words what he felt for Althea, what their connection meant, but he had to try. "Love isn't just an emotion," Elliot said, his voice gaining strength. "It's a choice. It's something you fight for, something you hold on to, even when everything else is falling apart. Humanity isn't perfect, we're flawed, we make mistakes. But love is what gives us hope. It's what pushes us to be better." He paused, his heart pounding in his chest, his voice trembling with raw emotion. Althea showed me a world I never could have imagined. She showed me what's possible when you open yourself to something greater, to something that transcends the boundaries we put between ourselves. And that's what love does. It transcends. It connects. And I believe that connection is worth fighting for. Another heavy silence followed his words, the air in the chamber thick with tension. Elliot's heart raced, his chest tight with anticipation. Had he said the right thing? Had he done enough to convince them? He had no idea. All he could do now was wait. The elders were silent for what felt like an eternity. Finally, the first elder spoke again, their voice softer, more thoughtful. Perhaps there is something to be learned from this connection, the elder said slowly. Something we have forgotten. The other elders murmured softly, their glowing forms shifting as they communicated in a way Elliot couldn't understand. The energy in the room changed, the tension lifting slightly, though the outcome was still uncertain. Althea stepped forward, her voice soft but filled with quiet determination. I believe that love, that connection, is not a weakness. It is a strength. It is what makes us capable of growth, of change. And that is why humanity deserves a chance. There was a long pause, and then, finally, the elder who had spoken first nodded slowly. Very well, Althea. You have made your case. Elliot's heart leapt in his chest, hope surging through him. Had they succeeded? Had they convinced the elders? But then, the elder's voice turned cold again, a sharp edge of warning in their tone. But know this: if humanity fails, if they prove themselves to be the danger we fear, the consequences will be severe. We will not hesitate to act. Elliot's stomach twisted with fear, but he nodded. I understand. The elders remained silent for a moment longer, then slowly, their glowing forms began to fade, dissolving into the streams of light that surrounded the platform. The air in the chamber grew lighter, the oppressive weight lifting as the elders disappeared, leaving only the soft hum of energy behind. For a moment, Elliot and Althea stood in silence, the weight of what had just happened sinking in. They had done it, they had convinced the elders to give humanity a chance. But the cost was high. The fate of Earth, of humanity, was still hanging in the balance. Elliot turned to Althea, his heart still racing, his mind spinning with everything that had just happened. Did we do it? Althea smiled softly, her eyes filled with relief and something deeper, something warm and tender. Yes, she said quietly, we did it. Elliot exhaled, the tension in his chest loosening. He had been prepared for the worst, for the possibility that they would fail, that the elders would reject them. But now, standing here beside Althea, he felt something he hadn't felt in a long time: hope. But as the reality of the moment settled over him, so did the weight of what came next. They'll be watching us, Althea said softly, her gaze distant. They'll be watching Earth. Humanity has been given a chance, but it's a fragile one. Elliot nodded, his chest tightening with the knowledge of what lay ahead. The battle wasn't over. The fight to save humanity, to prove that they were worth saving, was only just beginning. But they had been given a chance to make things right. And as he looked at Althea, standing beside him, her hand still resting lightly on his arm, he knew one thing for certain: whatever came next, they would face it together. I'll fight for us, Elliot said quietly, his voice filled with quiet determination. For Earth, for humanity, for you. Althea's smile deepened, and she stepped closer to him, her hand slipping into his. And I'll be by your side, Elliot, she whispered. Always. Elliot's heart swelled with emotion as he looked into her eyes, the connection between them stronger than ever. It didn't matter that they came from different worlds, different species. What they had was real, something that transcended everything, even the vastness of the universe. They stood together, hand in hand, as the shimmering lights of Eloria pulsed softly around them, and for the first time, Elliot felt a sense of peace. The future was uncertain, and the road ahead would be difficult, but they had each other. And that was enough. As they walked out of the council tower, the weight of the universe still pressing down on them, Elliot couldn't help but look up at the swirling, star-filled sky. Somewhere out there, Earth was waiting. And now, thanks to Althea, it had been given a chance. A chance to change. A chance to grow. A chance to love.